Hi everybody, it's Amy from Winterwood Studio, and I thought today we could try swatching my Sennelier Paris collection pastels. I'm really excited. I can't wait to try these and see how they look. I haven't tried them at all yet, so this will be my first reaction, and we'll swatch them and see how beautiful they are and what I like about them, and hopefully everything goes okay. All right, come on in and let's get swatching. Okay, everybody, today we're gonna be swatching my brand new soft pastels. These are the Sennelier Paris collection, 120 half sticks. So let's open these and try them. There they are, they're beautiful. All right, I'm gonna try to do this somewhat orderly. I'm just using a piece of Fabriano Artistico hot press watercolor paper. All right, let's try these. Okay, so I thought now would be a good time to jump in here and tell you my brain froze. Maybe from all the snow or something. But this video did not go how I planned. I would never normally use soft pastels without using a harder pastel underneath for the underlayer. But instead of doing that this time, for some reason, I was like, I'm going to do this whole video with the Sennelier pastels, and then I can just say this whole drawing was only Sennelier pastels, and I literally don't know what I was thinking. I would normally use the Prismacolor New Pastels or the Rembrandts underneath a soft pastel, like Unison. I seriously can't explain my thought process. But yeah, so I decided to use only Sennelier. And when I got to the layer where I would normally add in all the fine detail, the tooth of the paper was totally full and I could not add in any more detail. So this drawing, it's still really pretty. I like how it turned out, but it does not have the level of detail that I normally would put into a drawing, and it does not have as much photorealism as I would normally put in there. So I just wanted to hop in while I was doing the swatching and explain that and tell you what happened. I still think Sennelier are beautiful, gorgeous, luminous pastels. Just don't do what I did. Then you'll be fine. So there they all are, 120 colors, Sennelier's Paris collection. So today I have my tabletop easel set up, and I'm going to be working on the UArt sanded paper in their dark shade. UArt only comes in two colors. It comes in light and dark. And there's a little bit of puppy fur in here. The dog was in here while I was taking this down, and I stopped to pet her. I guess that wasn't a great idea. And we're going to be using my Sennelier Paris collection pastels, as well as this little bit of, these are the Stormy Skies 6 set. So this is going to be an all Sennelier demonstration. So let's get started. Because the paper is dark, obviously I'm not going to go in with watercolors or anything like that as far as underpainting. I grabbed a Stabilo Carbothello pastel pencil. This is 645. It's a reddish brown. And I am going to sketch in my landscape here. Okay, I think that's enough to get started. I'm going to start by going in with my darkest darks, and that's going to be over in this area. So I always start with the darkest dark, and then I go directly to the lightest light, and that is called making a color key. It tells you that you're never going to go darker than that dark and you're never going to go lighter than that light. And it helps you make sure that you keep the tonal value correct throughout the rest of your painting or piece. A good way to tell what your darkest dark and your lightest light is to squint at your reference. If you squint, you should immediately be able to tell where the darkest tone is and where the lightest tone is. If you're working from a photograph, you can also take it into a photo editing software and turn the saturation all the way down to make it into a black and white reference photo. Okay, you guys, I totally just went down to the sauna where we store the summer kids' toys, and I cut 2 slices off a pool noodle and cut it into quarters. So we're going to try this and see if this works for blending. Yes, it does. I can report pool noodles work good. This will be much easier on my hands. I'm glad I did that. The pool noodle does work to blend. I do feel it's still more aggressive than using my actual fingers. It removes a little more of the pastel than my fingers would do. And while that's fine for these early first layers, I probably would not continue to use that into the later layers. And in fact, you'll see that I don't use it once I get into the later layers. And even right here where I'm doing some finer details, you can see that I've switched to my finger, although I do switch back to the pool noodle. So the Sennelier works just fine for brushing off the UArt paper, as you saw me do there with the paintbrush a second ago. I wanted to put in a darker color, so I brushed off some of the lighter color to give me a cleaner surface to put that dark back in there, so that worked well. So I was expecting this to happen, but already I can tell that because these are so soft, they're filling up the tooth of the paper very, very quickly, which again, I was expecting. And normally I would have done an underpainting with like my Rembrandts or new pastels, but I didn't. I wanted to do just an all Sennelier pastel today. So again, I was expecting this to happen. I'm not surprised as I go if I want to add something and I feel like there's already a couple too many layers. I am just, like you saw me just doing, brushing off a spot and then going over it. So that if you see me brushing stuff off, that is what I'm doing. One other thing I wanted to point out is that these break beautifully with minimal crumbing when they break. If you do have one that makes crumbs, make sure you collect the crumbs. You can crush them up and then mix them together with some water and make a nice neutral brown pastel to use for backgrounds and things. Underpaintings, I'll do a video on how to do that one of these days. Here I'm just tapping back these clouds a little bit. One thing I wanted to talk about with pastels is that you definitely don't want to blend your last layers. It's fine to blend your first layers, but one of the things about pastel that makes them so special is they have a very luminous, reflective quality. It's the way the crystals of pigment are suspended in the actual pastel and the lack of binder. The way pastels are made, they're almost pure pigment, more so than I think any other medium, more than oil paint, more than watercolors. And because of the way the pigments are crystallized within the pastel, when you don't blend, the crystals retain their shape and reflect the light off the surface of their facets of their crystals, and that's what gives pastels their brilliance and their special light-filled sparkling quality. Blending can actually crush the crystalline structure of the pigments and makes them a little more dull and a little less luminous. So especially in your last few layers, you want to just Gently scumble on the color and then leave it alone. Don't touch it, don't rub it, don't press against it if at all possible, to keep the crystal structure of the pigments intact. One of my most favorite qualities of soft pastels, and it makes them an absolute joy to work with, especially when you're doing anything with light in it, or a sunrise or sunset, or reflected light off water. I just feel like there's something really special with the way pastels lay down and reflect the light that you just can't capture in any other kind of medium. I guess if I had to pick, oil painting would come fairly close. Translucent watercolors on a very bright white paper can come close, but really nothing's quite the same. It's just got a gorgeous glow to it that I have not been able to replicate with any other medium, and they are such a joy. Another thing I love about soft pastels is I think they're really easy for the beginner to learn art with. Just the fact that you can layer and blend so very easily. The blending ability is by far superior to acrylics and similar to oil paints. And the layering is like acrylics in that you can layer immediately right over the layer that you just did without waiting any time at all for it to dry. So it makes it really easy for a beginner to learn how to lay down color and how to layer and blend. And it's also great because you don't have to really think too much about leaving your brightest brights behind, because again, you can layer colors over each other. To some extent, you do want to sort of protect the areas that are going to be pretty bright, because if you put down like a dark green, you're not going to get that back to white. But it's not to the extremes that watercolor would require from you to have bright brights. So I think it's a really great medium for beginners because of that. I know some people aren't super fond of how the soft pastel feels on their hands, and I did just want to say that I use something called Invisible Glove. It's like a barrier cream that forms a layer of like silicone between your skin and whatever medium you're using. I use it also when I'm doing oil painting or any sort of messy artwork where I might get toxic pigments on my hands. It protects your skin from the toxic pigments of like, say, cobalt blue or cadmium yellow. But it also does dull the feeling of the pastel a little bit on my hand. I mean, it's not a miracle. You can still feel it a little, well, more than a little, but it definitely dulls that powdery, chalky feeling that some people don't like. So if you've tried soft pastels and you didn't like how they felt on your hands, I definitely recommend that you try the Invisible Glove product that I was just talking about, and I will drop the link down below as well so it's easy for you to find. So here I'm starting to put in some of the reflections of the trees. If you notice, even though the trees are green, I did not make the reflections green. I wanted the reflections to be visible, but not to stand out a whole bunch. So I used just a darker version of the watercolor so that you could see the reflection without it taking away from the glow of the sunset in the water. I find that the human eye is drawn to areas where there are the most contrast, whether it's between colors or in this case, values. So if I had done a dark green against that pale peachy color of the river, it would have been too much of a contrast and your eye would have been immediately drawn there, and I didn't necessarily want that. I wanted the V of the mountains and the sunset to be the focus. So now I'm putting in a little bit of reflection and texture in the water, and I'm also realizing here that I'm not going to be able to put in the layers like I wanted. So this is just about done, even though in normal terms it wouldn't have been. Okay, it's time for the tape peel, everybody.
Okay, everybody, so there is our project for today. As you heard in the voiceover, I'm not incredibly happy with it how it turned out. I don't know what I was thinking. Trying to use just the Sennelier pastels, that was not a good idea. I should have done my harder pastels as the underlayer so that I could have gotten in more details. I filled the tooth of the paper up very quickly with the Sennelier pastels, and I was expecting that to happen, but not quite as quickly as it did. So this is a little bit more impressionistic than I meant for it to be, but that's okay, you know, we live and we learn, and the next time I use my Sennelier pastels, I will 100% be using a harder pastel for the underlayer underneath, and I liked everything about them. They were beautiful and buttery, and the colors are just luminous and gorgeous. Just be aware that they fill up the tooth of your paper very, very quickly. So thanks for being here with me today. If you found this video helpful or useful in any way, I sure would appreciate it if you would hit the like or subscribe button. And thank you everybody for all of your support so far. And until next time, happy creating.